Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news coming out of this Florida State program, and it doesn't have to relate to the transfer portal this time. It has to do with head coach Mike Norvell staying put in Tallahassee, signing a contract extension through the next 8 years, but more importantly, giving the Florida State fans assurance that Mike Norvell is here to stay in Tallahassee. And as a college football fan myself, and I'm going to talk about Florida State and what I think this program can be in the next couple of years, and I'm going to talk about them in a very similar manner that we talked about Dan Lanning in the Oregon Ducks yesterday morning. And that is as a program, you take a look at the next 5 to 7 years and what programs do you want to buy stock in? What programs are trending in the right direction? I mean, Mike Norvell in Florida State, Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, those are two of those programs that are so clearly going in the right direction. If you wanted to buy stock in a few programs, those would be the two programs that you'd want to buy stock in. And as a college football fan, like, it is so refreshing to me to see in an era of college football where it's always, what's the next best thing? What's the next thing to move on to? It's really refreshing to see guys like Mike Norvell, Dan Lanning, who no doubt had interest from Alabama to be their next head coach, say, I have everything I want to, one, be happy personally, but professionally win at the highest level where I'm at right now. And I'm good. And I'm going to stay here and continue building what I'm building because I know it's something special. For Mike Norvell, I think that's what he feels. I think that's why he's staying in Tallahassee. And for Florida State fans, I mean, you have to be extremely excited about Mike Norvell locking it in for the next, 8 years on that contract. You guys know I'm fired up. Many of you guys who've been listening for the last couple of weeks and months know that I just feel like this Florida State program, something as special as building. That's kind of how I used to describe that team in 2023. Whenever we talk about Florida State during that 2023 season, the first word that always came to my mind was special. Yes, it was talented. They had the talent to go win a national championship, but it just felt special. And I think that's how I would describe this Florida State program as a whole. I want to talk Mike Norvell and what this Florida State program can be over the next 5 to 7 years. Really excited to get into this one. A lot of our conversation has been roster management and transfer portal updates. I'm excited to dive into this Florida State program from a bird's eye approach and bird's eye view and give you guys some of my thoughts. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys. A shout out to the Florida State fans. Many of you guys know it's been a blast updating Florida State and all the commitments that they've gotten in the transfer portal. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the boys. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, I want to get into Mike Norvell and why I think he decided to stay at Florida State. And one, anyone who followed this Florida State program, listen to Mike Norvell talk about the players, talk about the program, knew he loves it in Tallahassee. Like, this program means something to him. I think he knows he's building something special. So from a personal, emotional standpoint, this doesn't necessarily come as a surprise. Like, he loved his time at Tallahassee, but I think there's another way you can look at it that gets me really excited. I think should get Florida State fans really excited as well. And that is Mike Norvell views this program as a program that can be a perennial national championship contending program and team. And had he not felt like that, he probably would go take the Alabama job, because that certainly is. And I think Mike Norvell is telling us that this is a Florida State program that can build back to where it kind of belongs and where Coach Bowden had it for so many years, as a program that is a premier college football program in the college football landscape. And I think that's what excites me the most. And I think Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks, you kind of had that similar approach, right? Dan Lanning at Oregon knows he's building something special, knows he has everything that he needs to get this team to a national championship caliber year in, year out. I think Mike Norvell staying at Florida State, it kind of telling you the same exact thing as well. And I think that excites me the most. And again, in an era where, players trying to make the moves, coaches continuing to try to quote unquote advance in their profession, to see guys like Dan Lanning and Mike Norvell, coaches that I think if I was hiring college football coach and I could get any coach I wanted, Dan Lanning, Mike Norvell would be on that short list. It's nice to see those guys stay where they are and commit to building what I think is very special programs at Florida State and Oregon. And now I want to talk about what I think this Florida State program is going to look like over the next couple of years. And you look at this team, and I think there's so much to be excited about. One, like the quarterback spot looks so bright with guys like Luke Cromano coming in 2024. Brock Glenn showed some really good things. But as a broader kind of conversation with Florida State, the one knock that you have, or that not necessarily I have, but you get from the national media, is Mike Norvell is not recruiting at a high enough level to consistently win national championships. I think that's kind of a little bit of a flawed argument. And this is not me getting up here and saying recruiting doesn't matter at the college football level, because we all know it does, right? I mean, if you want to win national championships consistently, you need to get the talent. You need to get the players out of the high school and transfer portal ranks to be competitive at the top end of college football. That is one thing for sure. But I think the biggest knock on a lot of people have with Mike Norvell in this Florida State program is they're not getting it done at the high school ranks well enough. And I think two reasons to kind of push back on that narrative. One, you look back at the 2023 season, you just saw two teams in Michigan and Washington compete for national titles without recruiting top 10 classes consistently the last 4 or 5 years. And the Michigan Wolverines consistently, as a Michigan fan, I can kind of tell you guys this little insight here. Like, Michigan's been between 10 and 15 according to 24/7 Sports in the team rankings. Washington is sitting there around 30 to 35. And so these two teams emerged as the two best teams in college football, not necessarily recruiting at that top 5 rank. Now, am I saying that that's something is sustainable? No, probably not. You want to continue to recruit as well as you can, but I'm also saying that Florida State, I mean, you recruit well enough there. And then you combine that with the player development that we've seen from Florida State and the culture that's in place at Florida State. Why did we talk about Florida State being a national championship contending team throughout the 2023 season? Yes, they had the talent. Were they as talented as Georgia and Alabama? No, absolutely not. But what happened with Florida State is, one, that culture within the locker room was about as strong as you saw in college football. But more importantly, the player development was certainly there. So when you combine culture and player development with good recruiting, I mean, you can win national championships with that kind of recipe. In fact, I think a lot of people would argue that is the recipe. Now, obviously, Georgia does that at a high level. They recruit extremely well. They have a strong culture. They develop their players. You could argue that Mike Norvell is doing the exact same thing at Florida State. Now, the more important conversation I want to have here is Mike Norvell is getting it going on the recruiting trail, right? In 2024, you saw by far his best class that he's put together, and that was with a few really tough flips at the end of class, right? They were in on LJ McCray. They were in on a guy where they had KJ Bullen committed, and obviously flips to Georgia. This class for Florida State was trending to be a top 3 class until a few commitments fell through. And I think in 2025, you're going to look at even more improved recruiting class. And I think, why is that? Why are you going to get a more improved recruiting class? One, Florida State's starting to win games again, right? 10 games they won in 2022. They won 13 in 2023. But more importantly, I think players are looking at this Florida State program and saying, that's a program that I want to go play for. They're about to put a ton of NFL talent into the NFL draft. They're back kind of being a premier team that's competing for ACC championships and college football playoff spots. And the biggest pitch of all that Dan Lanning said in his video yesterday, I think Mike Norvell is going to hammer home on the recruiting trail the next couple of years, is if you're worried about your head coach not being there to 3 to 4 years, come play for Florida State. Because I just essentially, it sounds like, passed up on an opportunity to take the Alabama head coaching job to stay at Florida State. And I'll say this, if you're turning down Alabama, you ain't leaving for any other program. And so you look at Mike Norvell and what's going to happen on the recruiting trail. One of the biggest questions that these kids out of high school ask are you going to be here in 3 to 4 to 5 years if I'm going to commit to this program? And a lot of coaches they can't really look those kids in the eyes and say yes, because they are looking for the next best job. What can Mike Norvell say? He can look those guys in the eye and say, yeah, I just turned down Alabama to continue working at Florida State and building something at Florida State. So I think that is going to be a massive asset for Mike Norvell and this Florida State staff on the recruiting trail, saying you are going to when you commit to this program, you're committing to a guy in Mike Norvell that is going to be there and that is going to develop you and be there for your 3 to 4 to 5 years that you are at this Florida State program. Really excited about that. Many of you guys know, again, massive fan of what Mike Norvell is doing with this program from a personnel standpoint, but more importantly, from a culture standpoint. And it felt good to, we've talked a ton of Florida State football, but we haven't talked a ton of just being a fan of this Florida State program and how I think about it going forward. those are some of my thoughts. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Again, can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the boys like you guys have. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.